Greetings, I'm Barrett and welcome to Meet Me at the Table. Today is the day we're going to begin our playthrough of Aeon Trespass Odyssey. We are officially moving past the tutorial into our first day at sea. We are in the city of Knossos and we have our four titans our four Argonauts, I apologize. We have 9 titans, which is pretty awesome. And we're going to continue forward according to how our story lays out in the Truth of the Labyrinth, which is the first cycle in Aeon Trespass Odyssey. And the core game does come with 3 cycles, so this is a monumentally, what do you say? I guess you could say it's an epic adventure of monumental proportions. Took me a little while to get that out. Let's first take a look at all of our characters, see where we left off from the tutorial, and then we're going to dig right into the Truth of the Labyrinth. If you're excited to see Aeon Trespass Odyssey, and if our characters can continue through this campaign, then I need you to meet me at the table. This is our first character. This is Olympia. Her dial doesn't have anything going on, so we're starting our adventure for this campaign without anything dealing with her dial. She does start with this imprisonment card. She got lucky enough to gain that during the tutorial. I've given her already a weapon and things like that, but we'll be worried more about that when we come into any type of combats we're going to be going into. And of course, I've just kind of put this Titan out there for her to pilot, and when we get to any combats, it's probably the one she's going to pilot. Of course, that may change as we go through the mission, and if we do come to a battle and things change, I'll let you know. This particular ability, Memnos card, does give her an ability that is allowing her to reduce the suffered knockback by 2 whenever we do go into a combat. And we do have this ability as well going into any combats, and of course I'll explain a lot of that as we actually get into combats. But for now, that is our character. She has 1 endurance, 1 fury, and 1 wisdom. These are going to be important for our story part of this because those are going to be influencing the type of checks we're going to have to make, giving us more, we're going to be able to add to the dice rolls that we do. This is our second Argonaut. He has a lot of stats because he's got them from not only his Memnos card, Siren Survivor, which is giving him the ability to discard a condition token, or I can remove this card and discard a condition card. So this does give us an ability to help him as he's playing through the game to prevent him from becoming worse and worse in battle. Also, it could prevent any tokens that he's going to accumulate during the adventure into the battle, if they get those. We're going to look at his courage. He's got 2. He's got 1 endurance, 1 will. His dial, again, is unscathed from the tutorial. Lucky for him. And, of course, his name is Telebacchus. Our third Argonaut is right here. This is Penelope. She only has +1 will. She has no other things helping her out when it comes to that because none of her abilities are giving her any increases, and she has no Memnos cards either. Her dial, of course, is unscathed, which is great. We got through the tutorial with not really having much happen to our dials, which could be good or could be bad going into the next combat we have to face. Of course, we'll have to see how that all transpires once we start the story. Our final Argonaut and the, I guess you could say, reluctant leader of the Argonauts during the tutorial is Roz. Roz has 2 danger already because she took on a harpy while in the tutorial. She doesn't have anything else helping her out. She does have 1 courage here. And of course, this is the Titan in theory she'll be piloting as we go into the battle, but we'll see as that what transpires through the story. Here are the technologies I have learned. They're all across the top. And here are the ones that are in our deck that we can learn as we go through the game. These core technologies we all learned during the tutorial. And we learned ranged armor and weapons for our titans that we have. There is a change I do want you to understand. This card right here, the Anti-Doctrination Philosophy, it told me in the tutorial to take this card, but it was a misprint in the tutorial book. This card is not supposed to be part of the starting cards that we're going to be gaining. It says right here it requires rhetoric, and we do not have that card yet. It is right here. We have to learn that, and once we do, it'll lead to these particular advancements, which is this one right here. There is a card I should be adding to this deck though, so we're going to remove this one and add this one in Trading Solutions. We should have this as a potential learning ability at some point when we're going through the story. It's right here. This one leads to Trading Solutions, so that should have been part of our starting deck of technologies that we can learn. It's easily missed because it's a large card, so if you're playing this, watch out for some of the things that lead to cards. They might be the larger cards, not just all these smaller cards that you're going to find more often inside of the decks. Lucky for us, we get to carry over 2 Doom from the tutorial onto our Doom card here. If this advances too far, that could potentially lead us down a dark path and potentially a loss. Now, this is going to remain on the A side until there are 5 or more tokens on the card. At that point, we're going to flip it to side B. Now, text is very small, so you have to make sure you read it exactly right. And sometimes you might need a magnifying glass to read this, especially when you're 47 and you can't read very well because your eyes don't work. So it is really small text, which I wish kind of would have been a little bit larger, but that's okay. This is our Doom card with 2 on it. And we do have 1 token on our Inward Odyssey Truth of the Labyrinth card. Now, this is not our story card. This is the Inward Odyssey. This is something that's kind of going on inside our ship that we're going to be able to unlock different things that could potentially help us further our adventure, further our advancements in the game to be able to help us get more powerful. Now, of course, we're also going to have to be putting these on our story cards as well if we ever get one. And in order to win the game, you have to progress the story. But sometimes you might want to get some of these upgrades that are going to hopefully give you an easier chance to get through the story. So it's kind of a give or take as to where you're going to want to put the tokens. And every time you do get 2 of these tokens, you get to give yourself 1 knowledge here that you're going to be able to use to purchase these different things starting at number 1. The first one we get would be Endless Decks. Then we'd get the Fos Dance and the glitch in the engine and so on and so forth as we go down. But of course, the more we pile onto this, the less we're putting on the story. So, oh no, we got to figure out what we're going to do. And with that, we are going to move into the story. Here is our wonderful boat. The Argos is right here, nicely painted up and ready to go. This is our starting tile that we left off in the tutorial. We can go in one of 4 ways, but before we do that, let's look at the book and start our adventure. We'll begin our story with Truth of the Labyrinth in the main storybook. We're going to start at number 001 and read what it says. So it begins. The Argo cuts through the evening waves as the sun sets on the hunched silhouette of Knossos, the horned city. With great trepidation, the crew watches the shoreline for any signs of danger. Has the kingdom of Minos fallen? Or has the calamity passed by the ancient metropolis, leaving it unscathed? But the darkness finally comes. You hear a collective sigh of relief as the city lights up with the calming glow of oil lamps, but only a few. The fires of Knossos burned high and bright all year round in remembrance, says the old priest, who tended to you after your rude awakening. For its king, great Minos of Crete, could not bear the passing of his favorite son, Androgeus. Now only embers remain. Still, if the Argo is to sail the high seas again, we need to access Daedalus' vault, a thing only Minos can provide. There are many mouths to feed on the Grand Argos, and the hold is all but empty. The engineers say the aeropile engines will run cold without ambrosia. To sat them and replacement parts only the great Daedalus' vault may contain. And the Titans are becoming restless, not having set foot on dry land for many days now. After some debate, you decide to send a landing party ashore to meet with the Minosians, a few envoys, and an armed escort. Choose a party leader and continue. So at this point, we have to choose who it is that's going to be our party leader. I'm going to choose Penelope. Penelope is going to become our party leader for this one. Besides, I think she's got a lot of, well, she doesn't have a lot of skills, so maybe that'll be good. Maybe she'll learn some skills. Who knows? Maybe this could be a really bad idea. I don't know. Their pyre is all but deserted, save for a few fishers tending to their nets, and a beggar standing on an overturned crate addressing them like a priest of old. As you pass the beggars, he catches your gaze and says, "Have you come to witness the squalor of splendor, outsiders? The sins of the bull and the bull slayer? You will soon learn that it is all meaningless. I clung to the meaning for far too long and have been punished for it." You quicken your pace. You have no patience for a raving madman. "Only the truth matters, though it is bitter," he shouts after you. You make your way to the silent half-lit city. The streets are empty but well maintained, paved with ornate cobblestones and lined with statues of the gods and the great Minotaur. Here and There you get a glimpse of movement. Knossos is far from abandoned. It is fear that subdues the metropolis. On your way to the palace, you may take interest in one of the following. I can choose 1, a mixed group of children and teenagers, their faces covered in strange tattoos of fine geometric lines. That way I would note passage 003, but I don't go to it. Otherwise, I could choose an old blind woman crawling on all fours, looking for something and mumbling to herself, to the amusement of a few gaping onlookers. At this point, I would note down passage 0047, but don't go to it. This is a tough choice. Do I want to hang out with a mixed group of children and teenagers, or do I want to help the blind woman? I think I'm going to help the blind woman, so at this point I am going to note down passage 047, and at some point I may have to turn to that, but for now we just wrote it down on a piece of paper. You have no time for distractions though, so you hurry past the curious gathering and head straight for the palace. There, the honored guard stands watch. So there is some semblance of order in the city after all. You think, and after introducing yourselves, you ask for an audience with King Minos. I believe that is the pronunciation, Minos or Minos. I'm going to go with Minos, and if it's wrong, we'll just keep on going. You cannot see the guards' faces hidden underneath the elaborate helms, but as they turn to each other, you imagine them exchanging meaningful glances. One of them enters the palace, but the rest remain silent. As time passes and more guards converge on the gate, you become uneasy. You're outnumbered, and you chose, maybe poorly, not to take Titans with you. So at this point, we come to our first skill check. It says the party leader tests Wisdom 7 or gains 2, Fate. Argos Fate. It's Argos Fate. I'm going to gain 2 Argos Fate to get an automatic success. Well, I need a 7+ on a 10-sided die. So, 9 would have worked. I don't have any way to help this because her wisdom stat is, well, a good old 0. So I don't get any help. I think I'm just going to take the 2 because I don't trust my dice rolling. So we're going to gain the 2 Argos Fate and move to the straight success. That is what we're going to do. So at this point, we now have 2 Argos Fate. If we ever get to 9, or 10 or more, I'm sorry, we're going to see this particular passage here, and I'm sure that is not going to be a good thing. A couple other things you're seeing here is that Argo knowledge. That has to do with that inward Odyssey. And strangers. Strangers are usually bad. They're people that are influencing your crew or attempting sabotage on your ship or something of that nature. And we may see how these work during our adventure. Actually, I guarantee you we probably will. But at this point, we don't have to worry about that. But I just wanted to tell you exactly what you're seeing right there under this little box called Argo Fate. Having grabbed the 2 Argos Fate, we have an auto success. It says one of your company tells a joke. Not a good one, mind you. Someone laughs nervously. Nonetheless, the tension that was building deflates and blades remain sheathed. They do not see your metal, and you theirs. So at this point, we're going to gain Minonian's diplomacy of +1. Here is our diplomacy track, which will affect certain skill checks or cards or events during the game based on the type of, the type of group that you're interacting with. So since we're interacting with this one right here, we are going to get +1. We're going to erase that and move it back up to 0. Now, interestingly enough, you're noticing some of these tracks are above and below 0. During our tutorial, something had happened that had made us lose 1 here and gained 1 here. But at any time as this moves up and down, you're going to see there's going to give you advantages to rolling skill checks having to deal with these. And on top of that, these will affect different things that happen on certain cards. I do want you to note, though, down here at the war, if your track ever reaches this particular -10 war in any standing with any of these particular groups, you can never gain more back. You're always going to be stuck at war. Even it tells you to gain 5 for that certain group. You never will. There, of course, I shouldn't say never. There may be something somewhere in the story that may influence us to go above war again. But from what I understand after reading through the rules, that will never happen according to the rules. But again, things could happen in the story. Who knows? Let's go back to the book. The gate opens with a creak and a slender woman with jet black hair emerges. She holds a torch in her hand. She gives you and the guards a fleeting look, as if this was what she was expecting. I am Phaedra, daughter of Minos, she tells you in a soft, soothing voice. Follow me, there is much to discuss. We're going to move to 0068. Uneasily, you do as she says. She leads you through the meandering hallway of this palace, maybe mirroring the corridors of the fabled labyrinth itself. To the empty throne room, a large chamber with an open balcony overlooks the city. I saw you enter the bay. That marvelous ship of yours. Its design seems familiar and yet quite alien. She stops by a large spyglass mounted on a brass base and leans into it. I saw Titans serve you as if they were slaves. You must have come from far away to have stories to tell. She sighs. But I have not brought you here for idle chit-chat. She moves back into the chamber. For you see, in everything there is a purpose. I had a need, and here you are. We would kindly ask for an audience with your father, the king. Exquisitely. As it is in Minos who I would like you to find. The king has not been seen for many months now. Some say he went into exile. Others say that he died at the labyrinth. But I know it is not so. The honored guard are a bleak shadow of their former selves, as you might have already noticed, and I cannot spare a single one on the search lest the city fall. Fall for what? You ask quietly. A dark fog has engulfed the world. There are crazed men and monstrous things out there. Minos took 7 boys and 7 girls every 9 years to appease the Minotaur, and they called him a ruthless tyrant. Now the darkness beckons endlessly and does not care who it takes, just that it takes them by the dozen. She turns to you with a determined look on her stricken face. Find him, and you'll be rewarded beyond imagining. The kingdom of Minos may be diminished, but its treasures are yours for the taking. We came here for supplies and access to the Daedalus vault, you say slowly, contemplating her offer. I will send some right away, a taste of our gratitude. Even in absence, Minos will welcome you like equals. Now, what of my plea? After this unconditional show of hospitality, you cannot refuse. You need the supplies and spare parts for the ship, and without access to the Daedalus vault, the Argo will be restrained to the shallows around Crete. I am glad to hear there are still brave good men in this world, she says, smiling ever so slightly. Please, take my sisters Akakelis with you. She calls for her. Soon a guard returns with a younger woman with curly blonde hair and a disarming smile. She knows the land. She can be your guide. And I will warn you right now, I am probably going to pronounce almost every word that has to do with the name wrong. I'm going to do my best, but I apologize in advance for any mispronounced words. At this point, we have to choose one. You are unfamiliar with the lay of the land and the surrounding waters. It may be a good idea to have a local of the ruling family, no less, as a member of your crew. I'm going to gain 1 diplomacy, gain the Minonian Guide Ally Clue card. Well, I'm sorry, I get +1 diplomacy to the Minonians, which might not be bad. Or I could do 2, the Argo is a powerful and deadly vessel, hiding even deadlier secrets. Trixgullian Junction. It would be unwise to let an outsider on board, much less a representative of an imperialistic kingdom like Crete. I would lose 1 diplomacy and I would mark E7 on my sheet. I'm always too trusting in these games, and it's probably going to be the downfall of me, but I am going to go with the first one. I am going to gain the guide clue card and +1 diplomacy. From the book, you heard that you would be crossing off E7 if you chose not to take her, and that's found here in the choice matrix. You're seeing this little thing right here, and E7 would be right here. We would cross that off, which would affect different story moments or cards going forward in the future. Instead, we now have a Minonian guide. It says, write Archelius in the boons, afflictions, and notes section of the Argo sheet. Various effects may instruct you to make tally marks next to her name. If there are 10 or more tally marks beside her, go to 0043. You may dismiss the princess at the end of any voyage phase. If I do go to 0011, Aloof and demanding, the princess mostly keeps to her quarters. And that, of course, is one of these ally cards that are part of the, like, what do they say, the secret cards or something. And it does come from cycle 1. There are 3 different cycles of cards. And most of the time, you're just going to be using the cards from the specific cycle that you're doing. There may be points in the adventure where you cross over into other cycles before you finish the first cycle. And at that point, you would start actually gaining those particular cards as you play through the game. Let's go write this down on our sheet and add it to some of our extra cards that we have been holding on to. In the boons, afflictions, and notes, we have wrote her name down. And like I said, I'm just going to set this card next to the rest of our characters and everything, just so we still have in our possession, because if we ever do get the 10 or we decide to remove it, I'd have to go to one of these story moments. Very well. I will keep your crew fed and your ship running. You, in turn, will inform me of your progress. If you return our dear father to us, you'll have first pick from the Daedalus vault. You leave the palace at the break of dawn, deep in thought, when one of the nobles drawn here by your news of your arrival comes to you and says, "You look familiar. You have my grandpa's eyes and my grandma's nose. Are you of Crete? Surely." The least likely Argonaut gains the Menonian Heritage Memnos card. Now, we're going to see the passage noted earlier, 003 or 0047. We did 0047. We've grabbed our Memnos card here. These are ways of unlocking kind of their background to your Argonauts. And these could change as things go forward in the game. This one in particular is the Menonian Heritage. It says right down here, everywhere you look, familiarity, your roots are buried under the shattered island. Or shattered island is burying into you. Interesting. So we do have to flip this over, and we are going to gain the first power when you do this. So I am going to gain this during, what is this? I can exhaust this card during movement to gain 1 more movement for this movement. And when you exhaust a card, you just turn it like that. And let's see here, what else is there I need to tell you? Oh, this is what cycle it's from. This also shows you the tags that it has. So as you're going through specific stories, if any of these tags pop up, you're going to be gaining nodes onto your sheet here that is going to eventually unlock more of these powers as you go down. Also, when you do gain this card, you automatically give +1 to wisdom and +1 to courage. Where was wisdom just a little while ago? So I'm going to gain the +1 to wisdom and the +1 to, was it courage? Yes, it's courage. That is going to stay with us, but if we ever lose the card, we would then lose those particular abilities as well. I'm going to place the card right here for now. I don't have exactly the room for it based on how I set my character up here, but we are going to write that down. Oh, actually, I lied. She doesn't get this. She could get it. I forgot I have to do the least. She's just because she's the party leader doesn't mean she gains this. The least, what is it? The least likely Argonaut is going to gain this. So whoever has the fewest amount of Memnoses is going to be the least. If there's a tie, then it would be whoever has the least amount of Memnos cards and these particular nodes marked off. We have 2 characters that do not have one. Roz and Penelope both do not have a Memnos yet. So we're going to roll these off. I'm going to have Penelope be the black die and Ross is going to be the white die. Whoever gets the lowest number becomes the least likely. So it is Penelope. So I could have kept it all written there and have been just fine. She's going to gain the +1 to courage and +1 to wisdom. She's also going to take the Menonian Heritage. M-I-N-O-nian. Let's see if I can spell this right. Probably not. Heritage. There we go. She has that right there. Also, you're going to see these small little numbers up here, or these little boxes. Those are these small little numbers you're seeing right here. If you're ever able to unlock this, you're going to be able to read this particular story moment in the book and see what happens to you. So we're going to place this down here. That is now part of her little deal. She is now a Menonian Heritage. Another thing I forgot to do is I was super excited to gain that clue card that I forgot to give myself the +1 to our particular faction here. So I gave myself another one. We are now at +1. Now that still means we're only at +0 when it comes to any of the things we're going to be looking at for dice rolling or cards. But as our track slowly gets up, we were going to get far closer and closer to becoming Menonian, I don't know, greatness, whatever it means. So we'll see how it continues on. Let's go back to the book. Before we read 047, I do want to mention that there is a ton of these Memnos cards, lots of different cards that you can gain. You can only ever have 2 in your possession, and if you ever do gain one and you don't have the ability to do that, you'll be able to put this into a Memnos, what's called vault. And that is going to be able to be gained by future Argonauts that join your team. You also might be able to get them into the vault if, for example, your Argonaut dies for some reason. So there is a way to keep on collecting these. You don't have to discard them if you don't want them or remove them from the game or anything. You can just add these to the vault as you go, because there's so many of these things. I'm excited to see all the different backgrounds our characters could have. All right, let's read 0047. The image of the blind woman is etched in your memory, filling you with a sense of both hope and dread. Feeling the maddening pull of the Moria, you decide to remain in the Horned City, and against your better judgment, look for the wretch. As the sun rises and the people flock to the street, Knossos begins to reassemble the fabled metropolis it was supposed to be. But there's still something amiss. Guided statue of the gods and the Minotaur watch silently as you navigate the complicated web of streets and alleyways. If the Mannonian Guard is not with you, go to 0041. We do have that. So if the Mannonian Guide is with you, she grows restless and suggests you abandon this fruitless search. My sister asked me to aid you in all things, and I will, but this time could be better spent. There is a man here who claims he has the Daedalus' lost heirlooms. The Horned Guard could not persuade him to hand it over. Maybe you will. Choose. 1. If you listen to the guide's advice, make an Acatillus tally mark and go to 20. If you don't, Mannonian diplomacy goes down by 1, and I can see 041. Oh boy. Okay. What? Okay, so basically I'm going to go looking for the person, I believe, if I go to 41, that the one she's talking about. Or if I want to do what the guide says, I can go to 20, which looks like it has to do with dealing with a person who has a lost heirloom of some kind. Oh my gosh, there's already so many hard choices at the beginning of the game. And who knows what's the better one. There's 2 things going on here. 1, I'm actually kind of excited to see what happens when I get to 10 tally marks with her, which is the only reason I'd like to go to 20, not because I care about what this person's heirloom or anything is up here. I'm more interested in the tally marks. Though, of course, that person was blind and probably is some kind of prophet or something. I don't know. And so I really kind of want to see what that person says to you. Oh, I want to do both of these so bad. I think we're going to go to 20. I don't want to go to 20. I should go to 41. But I think I'm going to go to 20. Let's go to 20. Not only that, I don't lose any diplomacy towards the Mannonians, though it seems pretty easy to be gaining and losing diplomacy in this game so far. But of course, it's just the very beginning. Oh, tough choices call for tough times. Maybe I should just roll a die. Nope. Going to 20. So we've made 1 tally mark next to her name. So we only need 9 more to see what that resolves. But it says here, you follow your guide to a lonely house on the outskirts of Knossos. It's a peculiar building, long and squat, with small rectangular windows, now shut, and many pipes weathering it like metal snakes or heads of the dreaded Hydra. In fact, the whole house is made of bronze. You ask about it. The locals say the man is a bronze people, she offers casually. The bronze people, the warrior nation that came before us and supposedly collapsed under the weight of its own sins. But they also say Crete's crest, the back of a giant's turtle. People like to talk. Oh, check that out. We gain +1 Argos knowledge. That's going to be part of that Inward Odyssey Labyrinth, Truth of the Labyrinth card. So we're going to be able to unlock one of those going forward, which should be pretty sweet. We'll put that down on our sheet in just a second. But first, we're going to continue reading. It says, you knock on the door and enter. There's a great fireplace in the back of the room. You start to sweat. A man comes to you, short of height but broad of shoulders, with great copper mane and a pointy, oily beard to match. His skin is tanned and his eyes burn with fierce defiance. Through the wrinkles around them betray his old age. You ask about his heritage, and he neither denies nor confirms it. You explain your mission and ask about the artifact. He reveals the blade, a weird fin-like sword made of unknown metal. I don't want anything to do with the servants of the bull, he proclaims, pointing the blade at your guide. You'd better leave while you still can. So at this point, one of you tests Wisdom 7, so I can pick anybody I want. It doesn't have to be the party leader. It says each Argonaut may gain 2 fate to add +1. So then I don't think that's a great idea. I'm going to roll a d10. We're going to have Olympia. Olympia's going to do it. She has Wisdom +1, so she does get +1 to this roll. I'm going to attempt to hit the book here. Let's see how that goes and see what happens here. I got a 9. Oh, that's amazing. I don't even have to use any fate or anything. That's a straight up success. I'm super pumped. I'm going to go to number 27. You successfully persuade the man to hand over the weapon. This is far more than a sword, he says. It's of Atlantean design. They're supposedly called these control rods. Its life is all but spent. It may be. The people who made it may be gone, but their mechanics stayed behind. I heard there was a ship. They called it a submarine, hidden in a secret cove north of here. If you go that way, be sure to look for hidden markings that will point you there. So I'm going to note control rod blade under the boons section of your Argonaut sheet. Give +1 fury, least likely Argonaut. It gives, the control rod blade under bones section of your Argonaut sheet. It gives +1 fury. So I'm going to give that +1 fury to the person who rolled. She's going to gain +1 fury. She's at 2 now, which is pretty sweet. And then I think I'm doing that right. If I'm not doing that right, please let me know in the comments below. And of course, after the recording of this video, if you do look in the comment section, I usually put a pinned comment for any errors I have made during this playthrough after I've posted the video. But for what I understand, it gives +1 fury. So I'm going to write control rod on the boon section. I'm going to give the +1 fury to Olympia. And we're going to continue on here. It says the least likely Argonaut gains the death follows Memnos card. Read side 1A of the absent rule story card, and at that point we then return to the voyage phase, which means, I guess that means we really get to start to the voyage phase, which is kind of cool. So let's make sure we take care of all of that. We have our control rod here, and we just put +1 fury, and I put a dash to say it's on Olympia. If that's wrong, I'll correct that in the future. And then we still have that 1 slash, remember, from her going to that particular place. Roz is the only person that does not have a Memnos yet, so she is going to be the most least likely. She's going to gain Death Follows. It says here that I could discard this when you're about to perform a power roll and add +1 dice to my power pool, which is pretty sweet. On top of that, it says right here, Death Follows. Many people brush with death, but when he brushed with you, Thanatos paused. You have been trying to outrun him ever since. And on the back here, let's see what else I have that I have to deal with. Oh, I get this. I get +1 endurance and +1 fury. So we'll give those to me. +1 fury and +1 endurance. So she now has this particular Memnos card, which is pretty sweet. So we all have one, which is really cool. All right, let's continue. We have our first story card here. That's fantastic art. One thing about this game is I really like the art. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. This is super cool. Now, of course, the text is pretty small, so let's zoom on in and see what this says. As the Argo leaves Knossos port, you look at the horned city one last time. Not many have come to see you off, but a glint from the palace confirms your suspicions. Spying eyes are set on you. The Cretans delivered fuel and supplies as promised, enough to subsist, but only just. Is it all they could spare? Or a short leash? Either way, you should stick to the coast. Without much to go on, you fall back on the basics. Scout the island, question the locals. Here are the rules to the card. It says to collect progress. It says if you skipped the tutorial, create the Cycle 1 exploration deck. We did not skip the tutorial, so our exploration deck is already up and running. We do have our map tile out there, and the Argo is on there. We're going to mark day 0 on the timeline and proceed to the first step of the campaign round. It says here to progress through the story, you must gather these tokens here to progress, and each time you gain one of those tokens, we'll place it either on the current story or on that Inward Odyssey card that I mentioned earlier. If the Mannonian Guide is with you, you immediately place 1 token on this card. When there are 6 or more tokens on the card, I will flip it to side B. Sweet! So we already get one of these. And the cool thing about it is it shows us how many we need. Right down here on the card. It's kind of faint writing there, but it's kind of cool. So I'll place that one right there. Now that we've finished the introduction reading of this game, we're moving into the Inward Odyssey. It's an interesting way how this works, but according to the FAQ, whenever an Argo knowledge is gained, you're going to do the Inward Odyssey adventure at the end of that current step. So technically this is the end of the step where I read like the book, I guess. And then, though of course, if you ever gain them due to gaining the actual progress tokens, that means that you're going to do that Inward Odyssey at the or the story round. So there's a few different ways you can gain this. Now remember, we got our first Argos knowledge during the reading of that book. So that is over. So it's time to read our first N-word Odyssey and see what it says here. It says, endless decks. The metallic coffin is cold to the touch as you move your hand over its surfaces. Your fingers find subtle grooves, a pattern of some kind, hard to discern. The coffin has a window, a translucent panel, and through it you see the noble features of a dark-skinned woman, her face relaxed and gentle, as if she was asleep. And she very well may be. It's impossible to know which of the Argonauts interned in the mausoleum are just asleep, waiting their turn at the Aeons, and which have passed away to Elysium, or whatever place souls journey to after the eschaton. You look up, the tower-like crypts loom above like giant petrified trees, revealed by the receding sea. How many of you are here? 100? 1,000? This is the third of your expeditions into the depths of the Argo. The old priest mentioned maps of the place, and for a time these were enough, but now you've searched the bottom of the mausoleum, and there are still chambers to be explored. There are always undiscovered chambers, whole sealed decks, untouched for dead gods know how long. This is a very special ship, said the old priest, the last time you broached the subject. And maybe, in time, we'll learn its secrets. It's hard to keep track of time below deck, but the dwindling water supplies tell you it is time you turn back. Just as you reach one of the endless staircases, something big lumbers out of the shadows. A Titan! You don't know how it got so close without you noticing. You raise your guard, but it doesn't attack. You notice it's wearing an Arcturonian harness. It's of the common class, dubbed Dreamwalkers by the last Academy, but something seems slightly different about this one. It's leaner and more agile. You decide to take it back to the Titan Stoa. If you have fewer than 6 Titans, which we do not, we gain +1 Titan, and assign it the Iapetan Strain Pattern card. Otherwise, assign the Iapetan Strain Pattern card to any of your current Titans. Name this Titan. All right, so we're going to actually get to name a Titan. That's kind of cool. The Strain is a trauma pattern, so it replaces the normal trauma table of the Titan sheet. Unlike gear patterns, are permanently tied to the Titans and lost. Return to the box when the Titan is killed. Take care of your Titans. See pattern rules on page 47 of the rulebook for more details. Here is our card right here. Now this part is exactly the same. There's no change here from what I can tell. All the other Dreamwalkers that we have this exact same pattern, 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, 10 plus. But down here, there's a reflex. I can use this when we do our combat during the time that this particular symbol is on the cards for our primordial. We're able to jump in and do something of that during that time. And at this thing, I believe it means I have to gain 2 fate and exhaust this card, allowing me to move 1 space. I have decided to give it to Penelope's Titan here, just because it has so much protection going on for it. It's going to gain that strain, and we're going to name this Titan the Endless Dream, which we had to write down on our Argo sheet. So we now have the Endless Dream, and I put that strain next to it, and now we're down to 7 Titans as opposed to the 8 that we had. Since we've now been able to return to the journey phase, that means we're going to start. So the first thing we're going to do is move. You always have to move. This is completely mandatory. You always have to move the Argos, unless, of course, you have some kind of thing that outside of the rules prevents you from doing it. We're going to be moving. I can either move north, I can move south, or I can move east. And remember, we learned that in theory we have this control rod that might be something we need to do north. So we're going to take our tile. We're going to go up to tile number 22. Flip this over, let's discover it here, and place it down on the board just like that. And at this point, we will now move the Argos right up to there. Now, if we notice, this tile is still controlled by these Menonians, and it shows that we have to gain one of these particular tokens, because the second thing we do after we go onto a tile, well, actually the second thing is we have to do the timeline. So let's quick do that. Here's our voyage timeline, and this is going to keep us going in the game. There's a total of 80 different squares that we're going to be marking off. And notice there's some lines here. Those are things we can write in. For example, and during the tutorial, I had to write in fearful recollections. potential story moments, cards, or even things that you gain through the game may have cooldowns that you're going to write down on this particular sheet here. For us, we're just going to mark off number 1 because that's where we are. And notice we have 2 symbols here. One of them is going to be a structural technological advancement, and the other one is a battle. So we're going to be doing a battle almost right off the top. That's going to be awesome. So at this point, we've done this. Let's continue on to the next step of our campaign voyage stage. The next step is we're going to do exploration. This is, again, something you always have to do. The first 3 things you always have to do: movement, timeline, and exploration. Those are 3 things you always have to do on every time you do something in this game when it comes to the voyage phase. So we're going to trigger all our exploration symbols. The only exploration symbol we have right here is one of those symbols. That is going to be a progress token. So we're going to grab a progress token, and we can choose to either put this on the story, or we could put it on our Inward Odyssey, which already has 1 on it, meaning we would have 2, giving ourselves yet again an Argus knowledge, bringing our Argus knowledge to 2. I can't resist giving it to the Argos, so we're going to do our Inward Knowledge. I'm going to gain the second one. They're removing it and giving ourselves another Argus knowledge. We are now at 2. After we triggered all the exploration symbols on this card, we then move into the exploration draw step. During the tutorial, we gained this Bridge of Thalos card. It says here, during the exploration step, after resolving exploration symbols, draw and resolve 2 stacks of exploration cards. We have our deck of exploration cards right here. We're going to give them a good old truffle shuffle here real quick, and we'll put them down on the board. And at this point now, we're going to draw 2 stacks of these and gain whatever is inside of these. This is a predetermined deck based on the cycle and where you are in the cycle. This deck will change as you play through it, through potentially stories. It could also change due to adventures. It could change just from the timeline itself. Once you get certain distance into the story, or in the timeline, I should say, this will add and remove cards from this deck so that your resources you gain are going to be able to help you in the area of the game you're in. We'll start with our first card. We have received an Abandoned Shrine, so we gain 1 monument resource. If we were friendly with the Minonians, we would have gotten 2 resources instead. We're not friendly. We're almost there. We're getting closer. So we're going to put this one here. As you can see down here, this means that we are going to stop drawing for this particular stack. The next one we're going to draw is going to be this Smithy. It says I'm going to gain an armament resource. And if we're friendly, we're going to gain 2 armament resources instead. I am not friendly. And again, we're going to place this right down there. This particular symbol on the card is Bad News City, but it's not right now. What this is going to do is it's going to move the adversary. There could potentially be creatures out in the world chasing after you or trying to stop your gains in this world. This is going to move that as you play through the game. At the very beginning, though, of a new cycle, the adversary is not placed on the map until the storybook says so. So for this particular exploration, we are going to ignore all the adversary activations until the event instructs us to introduce it to the cycle. So what we're going to gain is we're going to gain both of these things on these cards. We're going to gain 1 monument and 1 armament, which we can use to make more weapons, armor, or such for our Titans. After we put those into our particular hold of our ship, we're then going to shuffle these in. There are particular cards in this deck that are going to be removed until potentially the next battle, or it could have a timer on it that's not going to be reintroduced until a certain amount of time has passed. But these 2 don't have that. They're going to be put right back in here. We're going to shuffle them up and have our deck ready to go for our next turn when we go through the journey phase. After putting them in our hold, we are at 2 monuments and 1 armament. Moving back to the tile, the next part we're going to do is, if on an unexplored tile with a story hub or a rest and relaxation picture on it, at this point we would consult the adventure table and resolve what's there. In the adventure, you could potentially gain Menmos nodes or other things that will affect the way the game flows. There aren't any on this tile, so we'll move into the next part, and that's Encounter. We'll resolve any timeline battles or battle events present on your current timeline. And we do have a battle. When we looked at that original timeline, it showed a little cross symbol there with a symbol of fighting. So we're going to have to do our battle at this particular time. When determining who we're going to fight, we have to look at our evolution track, which is right here. And we get to choose to fight either one of these creatures as a level 1. So we get to fight the Hecaton or a Labyrinthosaurus or whatever. which is pretty sweet. Also, I do want to mention one more thing. We do have that 2 Argo knowledge. We only learned about that first event. We don't get to learn about the second one until it becomes our story time, because, or it should say the story moments or anything like that, because we learned that because of gaining 2 of these progress tokens on the Inward Odyssey, unlike the one we found from the actual storybook as we were reading through it. I just want that to be clear. So we need to decide if we're going to take on a Hecaton or a Labyrinthaurus. And because I'm new to the game, and this is the only one I have painted up, we're going to take on this Hecaton in the next video. That's right, we are going to split this into 2 different videos, but don't worry, they're going to come out almost back to back. I'm going to start recording the playthrough of this fight right after I finish doing this video so that it can get out really quickly. I hope you enjoyed the playthrough. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell symbol so you know when more content from Aeon Trespass Odyssey comes out. Also, please feel free to leave anything in the comments below. I would love to hear from anyone. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, my Patreon is also found in the description of this video. The Patreons are able to help decide what games we play, what's going to be inside the game, like for example, and would normally let them decide what we would fight. We'd either fight this Hecaton or that Labyrinthaurus dude or something, but for this particular instance, since I'm trying to get these out as fast as I can for being back to back, I'm going to just fight this one, but in the future, my Patreons would have the chance of deciding what enemies we fight in this game. Those that have supported the channel are located here. Thank you for being part of the Patreon. It's awesome to have you as part of the channel and help me grow as we go forward. If now that's it, we're going to be fighting this guy in the next video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and if you're excited to see if Penelope, Olympia, Roz, and Telebacchus can take down this Hecaton and continue their struggle through Aeon Trespass Odyssey, Truth of the Labyrinth, then I need you to meet me at the table.